Alright, so now we're going ahead in the chapter 8, lesson 12. Once again, it's not in your book. They are two extra assignments that you really need to know and understand. You're going to see them once again on the NWEA and the I-STEP, but my priority is that you're prepared for 7th grade. And this is 7th grade math, and you're going to be doing even harder stuff for 7th grade math. So I need you to have a good, solid foundation in understanding this. So 7th grade, you're ready to go, and you will be successful. My point in teaching everything that I teach is that you're going to be successful, and I'll teach you things that you'll build on from this point forward. And when it comes to these lessons, I have a couple of you. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Now, I understand when we first look at some math, it looks like some kind of sci-fi leftover from Krypton nonsense mumbo jumbo that there's no possible way I can do. But we have to get beyond that and realize, well, it's math. And all math, I'm going to continue as long as I'm learning in life that there's new types of math beyond what I already know. And maybe even new ways of doing math beyond what I already know. If you were just left with addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, it's not going to be enough to get a high school diploma, let alone go to college. You have to continue to build on the knowledge that you know with math and learn with it and grow with it. This is one of those things. We're not going to do a lot of them. We're going to do 10 together on the video. You're going to do 10 for your assignment, and then we'll see some popping up here and there for the rest of the year. But this is where we're going to stop. We're not going to go to the next level, and then the next level after that. The math in these problems are truly basic mathematics. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And if I can remember the opposite function on the opposite side, then I know the steps that I need to follow. The problem with the I don't even get it people are when I say, okay, so what's my first thing I have to do? I don't know. Then I have to question, are you truly watching the video? Now when I say watching the video, it does not mean it's on your computer and you push play. You let it go. It means you're watching it, you're thinking about it, you're hearing what I'm saying, and you're following along step by step. I realize that you can watch something and duplicate on a piece of paper what you see on a screen and say, yes, I did it. But if your brain's not engaged, if you're not thinking about what I'm saying, if you're not following along, then you're not truly watching it because you're not learning. This is a great learning tool for you, even though it takes a lot of time on my behalf to create it for you. I'm happy to do it because I've seen so much growth in about 80% of you. But it's the 20% of you that are putting your heels in the ground and saying, yeah, I don't like it, I can't do it. You're really hurting yourself. Yes, I could take the extra time and re-explain it 14 other times to you in the class, but we have one chance to do it, and we can do it on our own, focused on our computer, and do great. Or we could take several more days and several more hours of reviewing it until you do get it. Because this stuff doesn't go away, my friends. This is mathematics. Mathematics is pretty easy and kind of fun to do if we simply learn it. So when we talk about inequalities, we're doing the opposite function on the opposite side. That is going to follow you from 6th, 7th, all the way through high school because they're just basic algebra steps on how we solve things. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, freshman year, all the way through chemistry also. So if you plan on getting a high school diploma, which I know every one of you are going to do because I have faith in you, and I know you have that desire to learn, then learning this is going to be a key to you being successful. Where this lesson is different, the first lesson out of the book was with one math step. This one is going to have two. Mind blown, I know. Throw my pencil down. I can't do this. It's impossible. No, it really is possible, and it really is easy. It's always going to be my first step is going to be, and I'm going to start with addition, and I'm going to change to subtraction because it's the opposite. Or I'm going to start with subtraction, and I'm going to change to addition because it's the opposite. And then I'll do it on the opposite side. My second step will always be, I'm left with multiplication or I'm left with division. So if I'm multiplying, I'm going to divide. If I'm dividing, then I'm going to multiply, and I'm going to get rid of it, and then my variable gets by itself. My first step, once again, is getting my variable by itself. That's what I got to know. And then I do my first math problem. Once again, it's either going to be addition or subtraction. I do the opposite. Then I do it on the opposite side. My second step will be to multiply or divide. I do the opposite, and then I do it on the opposite side. That will leave me with my inequality. And my inequalities will mean the exact same thing as they did the very first day that we identified an inequality and then graphed it on the next lesson. If it's an open circle, it means it cannot be that number. It can be anything less, or it can be anything greater, but it cannot be the number where the circle is. If it's a dot, a filled-in circle, then I know it does include that number, or it could be anything less than, or it could be anything greater than. Now, the first time that I introduced inequalities to you with this set of lessons, chapter 8, I said these steps are going to be vital to understand. You might take the time to write them down. And there were a large handful of you that actually wrote these down. I would still suggest for those of you, especially those that just say, I just don't get it, to take the 2 extra minutes at the most that I'm asking to write down these 4 sentences. Because these 4 sentences are key to being able to plot an inequality. Something that you're going to have to do from this point forward in school. A filled-in circle, once again, as I just said, means that it includes that number. An open circle does not include that number. I just said those 2 points. Well, I can't remember which way to fill it in. That's why we wrote down these 2 sentences. If the variable is being pointed to, then the arrow will go to the left. The variable that I don't know what it stands for because it's any quality that it could be, it has to be smaller because the arrow is pointing to it. If the variable is pointed away from, so it's actually pointing at the number that's there, then the arrow is going to go right because my inequality, my variable, has to be the largest that it can be. So now we're going to get into the math. Follow along. One of the key components to this is to understand how much I strive to help you. I take you step by step. I explain it. I teach every reason why I do a different math problem the way I do. Even when it comes to the integers and I'm adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers or multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. It's all in this video. You don't just have to remember it, you just have to relearn it as I'm teaching it, just in case you forgot. The other thing is to always notice that I try to help you when you're doing your homework. Down at the bottom on your last assignment, I put some key information. To remember the new step, which was if I multiply or divide by a negative, then I had to flip my sign. That's down there at the bottom of this assignment, on the practice side and on the homework side. And then I also said what the steps were. Opposite function, opposite sign. That is also on the bottom of this assignment, on the front side and on the back. Make sure you look at it. If you don't have this side up, where it starts with negative 19 is less than or equal to 2 minus 3 cubed, then turn your paper over, you're on the wrong side. So the first step I'm going to do is to write down my problem so I can do the math. Now, there may not be enough room for you to write all of your 10 math problems. I made an answer key like I always do, and I was able to put my handwriting in there. Some of you do write a little bit larger than I do. Please, by all means, get a separate sheet of paper, staple it to it so I can give you credit for showing your work. That I don't mind. I write it down so then I can mark all over it and not get confused as to what I'm doing. Especially if I make a mistake and I've written all over my original, then I can't always see what the original was. I find what first? I find the variable. That's what I know I have to get by itself, so the rest I know what my math is to do. So I'm going to look at what I'm doing here. Well, it says that I have a 2. So I have 2, and that means I'm adding 2 because there's nothing in front of it. The subtraction sign, we'll look at it in just a minute. So if I know I'm adding 2 here because there's no sign in front of it, then the opposite is to do what? So instead of adding, I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to do my opposite function, which means I'm then going to rebuild my math problem as I'm doing it so I know what work to do. I do my opposite function, which is to subtract 2. That cancels that out. Some of you don't like to mark it out. Once again, that's fine with me. I get confused as to what I've already used if I don't mark it out. So I mark it out. Then I do it on the opposite side. I also subtract 2 over here. Subtracting integers. Can I subtract integers? Yes, I can. Do I have the same sign? Yes, I do. I'm going to, can I subtract integers? No. Change the positive to subtraction to addition, change the sign of the second number. That gives me my two negatives. So when they're stacked like this, they're already my negatives, and then I can add, yes I can, keep the sign. So I know my answer is going to be negative. When I add them together, 19 and 2, I have negative 21. So I kept the symbol. I know that negative 21 is over here, and now I have my 3q. Well, what do I do with my 3q? Well, I'm multiplying by a negative 3. So I have to do the opposite function of multiplying by negative 3. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is to divide by negative 3. When I divide by negative 3, that cancels it out once again. So I know I have my q by myself, and I said from the beginning, that's what I have to start with. Get my variable by itself. So when I divide it by negative 3 here, then that means on the opposite side, what am I going to do? I'm going to divide by negative 3. Now, dividing by a negative. That was that extra one new thing that I taught in the last video. When I multiply or divide by a negative, that means this sign has to flip. So I have to make sure that I flip my sign. Then I can do my division. So negative 21 divided by negative 3 now. Can I divide positive and negatives? Yes, I can. If they're the same sign, I know it's positive. If they're opposite signs, I know it's negative. These two are the same, so I know my answer is going to be positive, and then I just do the math. 21 divided by 3. Well, 21 divided by 3 is just simply 7. I know it's a positive 7 because they're the same sign, and dividing or multiplying by the same sign makes it positive. So I know that when I finally end up with my answer, I know 7 is greater than or equal to q. Well, let's look at what that says then. I have a 7, and I know it can be equal to. So what do I put on the line? A circle or a filled-in circle? Well, I go to the 7, and since that underline is there, I fill in my circle. It's a complete dot. So I put in my dot where the 7 is. And then I look at what it's saying. I find the smallest, and I know the smallest because the arrow points to it. So the arrow points to the q, and that's the smallest. If the arrow points to the variable, then I know everything to the left is going to be shaded in. Why? Because q can be anything equal than or less than 7. Everything equal than or less than 7. So once again, as I go through these, and we're going through 10 of them, if I go too fast, just pause the video, rewind it a little bit. If you stare off into space, then please, by all means, rewind and rewatch, because I'm taking you through every step that you need to know to do a good job on your assignment, to get an A, but most importantly, to be successful in your future in mathematics. All right, so 2. By the way, on your assignment, it goes straight down. We often go from left to right, but the way this one printed out, it went straight down. So I have 6 plus 2v is greater than, because it's being pointed away from, negative 4. So I write down my problem, and I ask, what's my first thing I have to do? My first thing I have to do is to get my variable by itself. So I look at what math is being done. I have a 6. Nothing in front of it, so I know it's a positive 6, which means I'm adding it. So I have to do my opposite function on the opposite side. My opposite function then is negative 6, or to subtract it. If I subtract by 6 here, that cancels it out, and then I do it on the opposite side. So I'm going to carry my subtracting of 6 over here. I've dropped down my symbol so I can start filling in the information that I find after my first step of math. I have negative 4 and a negative 4. Can I subtract integers? No. I'll say it right this time. Addition or subtraction becomes addition. Change the sign of the second number gives me 2 negatives. When I stack them, I see they're both negatives. So I keep my sign, and I do what? Add them together, right? All that means is if I took 4 steps back, and then I took another 6 steps back, then I go to a negative 10. That's all it is saying. I keep everything else, and I begin to look at what math I have left. So now I have 2v is greater than negative 10. Well, what am I doing to the v? I'm multiplying by 2, right? So if I'm multiplying by 2, the opposite is to do what? Divide by 2. So if I have a multiplication by 2, and I do the opposite function, then I do it on the opposite side. I divide by 2, that cancels it out. I come over here, and I divide by 2. On the opposite side, then I have negative 2 divided by negative 10 divided by 2. Can I divide integers? Yes. So I'm going to set up my division box. Top number goes inside my division box. My my divisor is my denominator. So I have negative 10 divided by 2. Well, how do I know what sign it's going to be? Opposite signs in multiplication and division means I am going to have a negative answer. My division, therefore, is straightforward. So I know it's going to be a negative, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. So I know I'm going to put that answer here, and then I have my inequality. V is greater than negative 5. I know it's greater than because the arrow points to the negative 5. If it's pointing away from the V, I know that means that it's greater than. So then I have to figure out how to graph it. When I graph it, I look at the symbol. It is the greater than sign, so I know it's not equal to negative 5. And if it's not equal to negative 5, then that means where the negative 5 is, I'm going to put an open circle. Then I look at which way it's going to point. The V, well, the arrow is pointing away from it, so that means V is greater than. If the arrow points away from my variable, then I know everything to the right of my circle or my dot is going to be filled in, because negative 5 has to be the smallest that we go. Number 3, 4f plus 3 is greater than or equal to 31. I write it down so I can work on it. Once again, if it's not big enough in that space between your problems, please use a separate sheet of paper. I am fine with that. I look at this and I figure out what I have to do first, which is to get my variable by itself. When I have my variable by itself, then I know that I've solved for my inequality. So if I'm getting my variable by itself, this is a sign I'm working on, and I'm adding 3 to it as my first step. So I have to do what? Have to do the opposite function, then on the opposite side. So I'm going to rebuild my math here. My opposite function of adding 3 is subtracting 3. Those are going to cancel out. Once those cancel out, then I do it on the opposite side. So subtracting 3 here, I'm going to subtract 3 here. That's straightforward addition and subtraction. 31 minus 3 is simply 28. So I know I'm left with 4f is greater than or equal to 28. So now I have to get rid of my 4. What am I doing with my 4? What is this coefficient doing to this variable? It's multiplying, right? So I have to do the opposite to get rid of it. If I'm multiplying by 4, then the opposite is to divide by 4. So I divide by 4 here. That cancels those out, which tells me I'm going to divide by 4 over here. That leaves me my f by itself, which is what I have to have. I divide it by 4. I do it on the opposite side. I'm going to divide by 4 over here. Straightforward division since the end of 3rd grade and all of 4th grade. 28 divided by 4. I put it in my division box. 28 divided by 4. 4 goes into 28 7 times. So I know that my answer is 7. So the answer to my inequality is that f is greater than or equal to 7. It means greater than or equal to because the arrow is pointing away from the f. So I know I'm going to find the 7. Can it be equal to it? Do I put a dot? Or can it not be equal to it? Do I put a circle? It has the equal sign with it, so I know I put the solid dot where the 7 is. Then I look at where my variable is. The arrow is pointing away from it, so I know that has to be my largest number. So I know that if it's being pointed away from, the 7 is the smallest that I can go. So I have to fill in everything to the right because f can be anything greater than 7 or equal to it. Number 4. 4 plus, oh, this one has division in it. Doesn't really change what I do. P divided by 2 is less than negative 8. I write it down so I can show my work. I figure out what I have to do first, which is to get my variable by itself. So this is the side I'm going to work on, and when I look at it, my first step is I have a 4 here. It's not a positive, negative, nothing is in front of it. This does not tell me what I'm doing with my 4. What's in front of it tells me what I'm doing with my 4. So I'm adding with 4, so I'm going to do the opposite, which is to subtract by 4. So I know I'm going to rebuild my information down here. I do my opposite function. That gives me a positive 4 minus 4, which cancels it out. Now I do it on the opposite side. I'm subtracting 4 here, so I'm going to come over here and subtract 4. Once again, it's going to be subtracting integers, which changes it to addition of negative numbers. Or when I stack them, once again, I see they're both negatives, so I keep the sign and add them together. A negative and a negative makes negative, and 8 plus 4 is 12. So I have negative 12 is greater than whatever this is. Well, this is P divided by 2. So this is my second step, right? What am I doing with 2? Dividing by it. So the opposite would be to do what? I have to multiply by it. So I'm going to have to do my opposite function. I'm dividing by 2 here, which tells me that I'm going to multiply by 2. Once again, if I'm dividing by 2, multiplying by 2, that cancels it out, and it gives me P by itself, which is what I have to have. Now I'm going to do it on the opposite side. I'm going to multiply by 2 over here, so I multiply by 2 over here. Can I multiply integers? Yes. Do I have the same sign? No. So my answer is going to be negative. Multiply the two numbers in. 12 times 2 since third grade is 24. So I know since they're opposite signs, it's going to be negative. 12 times 2 is 24. That answers my inequality. P is less than negative 24. So then I have to graph it. When I graph it, I look at my symbol. What symbol do I have? Well, there's no line underneath it, do I? That is there. Excuse me. So I'm going to have to put a what? An open circle. It's an open circle because it cannot be equal to negative 24. So where the negative 24 is, I put an open circle. Now, something I mentioned in the last video that I'm going to mention before we get to number 5. If when I'm plotting it, I don't see the answer that I said it should be equal to up here on my line, then I know I did something wrong. So you have to go back and check your math. Anytime that the answer you end up with is not on this number line, you did something wrong, you made a mistake, and we all do. So just go back and change it. I know that it's negative 24. I put the circle because it cannot be equal to it. And now I look at where the arrow is pointing. The arrow is pointing to the P. I know it has to be the smallest number. And therefore, since it's pointing to the P, everything to the left is going to be shaded in. Because it cannot be equal to negative 24, but it can be equal to all of these smaller numbers. And once again, in negatives, the further away I go from 0, the smaller my number value is. So number 5, I want you to do number 5 on your own before I go to the next few. Practice it, think about it, go through your steps. Some of you are going to get it really easy, and some of you may struggle. We'll figure out your steps. So please pause it and then unpause and replay once you get your math question done. So hopefully you have your answer. And your answer looks like this. Hopefully you went through your steps. You saw that you were adding by 2, so you subtracted here, and you subtracted here, which gave you 66. And then you saw you were multiplying by 6, so you divided by 6, and 66 divided by 6 is 11. You looked at your sign, you saw that it was underlined, so you put a solid circle on the 11, and the arrow is pointing to the Y, which has to be the smallest, so you shade it in to the left. So if you didn't get that answer, if it's not graphed correctly, look at this work and figure out why. Pause the video, study what your steps were compared to my steps, and make sure that you understand what you're doing as we go to the top right of your paper now into question 6. Question 6, negative 7 is greater than negative 6 plus r divided by 4. I write down my math problem so I can work on it and mark it up. I know that I have to start by finding my variable by itself. So on this side, I see I'm subtracting by 6. This is where, once again, what's in front of the number tells me what I'm doing. So then since it's a negative, I know I'm subtracting. The opposite of subtracting, opposite function tells me to add. And when I add negative 6 and positive 6, they cancel each other out. They cancel each other out, so then I'm going to do what? I did my opposite function, now I'm going to do it on the opposite side. The opposite side tells me to take and add my positive 6 also. So when I'm adding positive 6 to negative 7, can I add integers? No. Do I have the same sign? No. Can I add integers? Yes. Do I have the same sign? No. Excuse me. So I'm going to keep the sign of the largest one. So I know my answer is going to be negative. 7 minus 6 then, since they're opposites, gives me my negative 1. Now I'm left with r divided by 4 is still less than negative 1. Still have to get my variable by itself. What am I doing to r here? Well, I'm dividing. So I have to do the opposite function. What's the opposite function of dividing by 4? Multiplying by 4. So if I'm multiplying by 4 and dividing by 4, that cancels it out. And then I do it on the opposite side. So I'm going to come over to my negative 1 and multiply by 4 over here. Can I multiply integers? Yes. Do I have the same sign? No. So I know my answer is going to be a negative. And when I multiply 4 and negative 1, 4 times 1 is simply 4. So to solve for my integer then, I have negative 4 is greater than r. Greater than r. Well, what's that tell me? Well, when I look at it, there's no line with it, so I know it has to be an open circle. So I go to my negative 4, and I put my open circle. Which way will I shade it? Well, the arrow's pointing to r, so r has to be smaller than anything else that's not negative 4. So if it's pointing to my variable, then I shade everything to the left, because it's the smallest. Number 6. Once again, I know I'm going through these fast. Please pause the video and make sure that you're following along and being able to fill it out. You can pause it 40,000 times. I'm okay, as long as you're getting it. On 7, I have negative 43 is greater than negative 6n plus 5. Have to get my n by itself. Over here, I'm adding by 5, so I have to do my first step. Opposite of addition is what? Subtraction. So I'm going to do my subtraction, which cancels it out, and then do it on the opposite side. Negative 43 minus 5. Subtracting integers I can't do, which changes the subtraction to addition, changes the sign of the second number. When they're stacked, I see they're both negative. So it takes me to the same point. They're both negative, so I keep the sign and add them together. 43 plus 5 is negative 48. That leaves me with this step. So I have negative 6 times n. So now when I look at it, that should clue something in that I'm going to have to do to my sign here in just a moment. My opposite function of multiplying by negative 6 is to divide by negative 6. So if I divide by a negative, once again, that should tell me I have to flip my sign. That's the only new thing when it comes to integers. Everything else we've already done. So I'm dividing by negative 6, which tells me to flip my sign. So I know n is what? Well, I'm going to have to flip it, so I know it's actually now going to be greater than the less than what it originally said. So it's going to be greater than whatever this is over here. I divided by negative 6. I do it on the opposite side. So now I have 48 divided by 6. Well, I have the opposites or the same sign. Can I divide fractions? Yes. If I have the same sign, it becomes what? Well, same signs tell me to have a positive answer. So then I take 6 and I divide it into 48. That gives me a positive 8. If I didn't end up with positive 8, and I end up with like a negative 8 because I forgot that step, then I would go up here and see, oh, there's not a negative 8 up here. I must have done something wrong. It's not, oh, this paper must be wrong. It's, I made a mistake. And I'm allowed to make mistakes. Let's learn from it. So now I look at my sign. Is it underlined? It's not, is it? So if it's not underlined, I know I put a circle. So I'm going to find the 8, I'm going to put a circle, and then look at which way the arrow is pointing. The arrow is pointing away from the n. So I know n has to be anything greater than 8. If it's pointing away from the letter, then I know I'm going to shade in to the right, because the 8 is the smallest that I can go. Number 8. Negative 7 is less than 5 plus 3 times s. Write it down so I can work on it. I know I have to get my variable by itself. So I'm going to start with what's happening here. Once again, there's no sign in front of the 5, so I know it's a positive, so it's addition. The opposite of adding my 5 is to subtract 5, right? So 5 minus 5 cancels those out. And then I know I have to do it on the opposite side. So that leaves me with my 3s. And then over here, I'm going to subtract my 5 also. Same negatives, right? I can't subtract them. So subtraction becomes addition. Change the sign of the second number, which still shows me that these are both negative. So I keep the sign of negative, and I add them together. 7 plus 5 is 12. So I'm left with negative 12 is less than 3s. What am I doing with my 3? Multiplying. Anytime I have a coefficient and a variable, then I know I'm multiplying those together. So the opposite function is to divide. So I'm going to divide by 3. That's going to cancel those out. And when I divide by 3, then I know I'm going to have to do it on the opposite side. When I do it on the opposite side, I have negative 12 divided by 3. Can I divide? Yes. Do I have the same sign? No. So I know if I don't have the same sign, then that makes my answer a negative. And 3 goes into 12 4 times. So I know that what we're saying is negative 4 is less than s. So what type of circle am I going to put? I'm going to put a circle, or am I going to put a dot? Well, when I look at it, there's no underline to it. So I know I'm going to go to the negative 4, and I'm going to put an open circle because it can't be negative 4. The s is being pointed away from, so the s has to be anything greater than that. So therefore, once again, on positive and negatives, on the negative side, if it's a greater than number, then I know it has to be closer to 0. So that tells me if it's being pointed away from, I'm going to shade in to the right, because my negative 4 is the smallest value that I can have. All right, so this is where we're going to pause again. This time I want you to do 9 on your own, and I want you to do 10 on your own. So if you want to just do 9 and check your answer, because that's the way I'm going to show it on the video, and then do 10 and check your answer, that's fine. Or you can do them both now, and then push play. But pause it, do the work, come back to me. So hopefully you have an answer from number 9 at least, and then number 10 if you wanted to. So we start with having 5 minus 3b is less than or equal to negative 22. And this is the way your answer should have looked. It's a lot of math and it's a lot of markings, but it's not difficult math. It's just remembering the steps. I had addition of 5 because it's a positive number, so I know that's adding when it's out front. So I subtracted by 5, subtracted by 5. They're both negatives. I kept the sign. I got a negative 27. That left me with negative 3b. Mine is greater than is less than or equal to negative 27. Then I divided by the negative 3. Hopefully you caught it and you thought I'm dividing by negative 3. It means I got to switch my sign from less than to greater than or equal to. And then you divided negative 27 and negative 3. Dividing with the same sign just automatically makes it positive, and you got 9. So then you found that it could be equal to 9, and that the arrow pointed away from the b, so the 9 was the smallest number it could be, so you shaded it in. So if you went on and did number 10, check your work on number 10. If you didn't, pause it, do number 10, and then come back to the video. Number 10. Negative 5 plus a divided by 3 is greater than or equal to negative 4, and you had to get the a by itself. So your answer should look like this. You should have where it says, if I would not even look at it down there, that I have a 3. It could be equal to 3, or it could be anything greater than. So A is greater than or equal to 3. That's what we have. How do we get it? Subtracting 5 was my first thing. It's a negative 5, so I know that's telling me it's subtracting. I did the opposite and I added, canceled out, added 5 over here. That left me with a positive 1, because these are opposite signs, which I know that I keep the sign of the largest one, and then I subtract them. And 5 minus 4 is 1. So that left me with A divided by 3 is greater than or equal to a 1. The opposite of dividing by 3 was multiplying by 3. So I canceled that out and multiplied by 3. And 1 times 3 is 3. So I do know that A is indeed greater than or equal to 3. Underlined is my symbol, so I know it's filled in because it could be equal to 3. And A is being pointed away from, so I know it has to be the greatest number because 3 has to be the smallest. I know this is a lot of steps, and I know it looks foreign, but seriously, if you pause and you think and you truly follow along and engage yourself, you'll see, well, this is not difficult. I know if I'm adding, I'm going to subtract. I know if I'm subtracting, I'm going to add. And then my second step will be, well, if I'm multiplying, I'm going to divide. And if I'm dividing, I'm going to multiply. I cancel out the side where the variable is, and I do the math on the opposite side. Not difficult math. Then I know that if the symbol is underlined, well, if it's underlined, then I know it could be a solid circle. If it's not underlined, then I know it's an open circle. If the arrow is pointing to my variable, then I know it's going to be the smallest, and it has to be shaded to the left. I know if it's pointing away from my variable, it has to be largest, so I shade to the right. So you're going to work on this assignment now. You have 10 questions. It is a long video, but I did a lot of math with you because I wanted you to practice this over and over and over again. Once again, this is the last time we're going to do this as an assignment, standalone work. We're going to be doing it as spiral questions on the back of our assignments from this point out. But this is something you have to be successful and have a good foundation on. And as long as you're following along, you will. If you have any questions, you followed along, you can show me your work and answer my questions. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to help you get an A, because I know you can. You just have to be willing to persevere when something seems so difficult. And it's really not. It's basic adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, all of which you have done since 4th grade. I know you can be successful. You just have to be willing to do it.